What is up, guys? So I've got a bit of more of a fun Darklord build, and I'm gonna have some replays of this very fun build. It was an idea given to me by a mate, but yeah, so this is a Darklord kind of mill focused deck, and what I really like about this variant compared is Darklord's main weakness obviously is maintaining hand advantage and stuff, but this takes advantage of the graveyard a lot by using cards like Back to the Front and Necro Fusion and Storm Dragon's Return, and so it's almost like things like Charge of the Light Brigade become like a draw 3 card because you're dumping them into the graveyard and then you're going to use the resources from there. So really fun Darklord build to try out. I definitely would recommend this. It is not as competitive as the other Darklord builds for sure, though I have upgraded them, so I will have another profile coming out soon, but it is definitely good enough. It'll get you some local wins, definitely, because it does do the job in that respect. But let's move on to the build. So Darklord ratios, we're playing one Morning Star. Morning Star's a really good Darklord to play, obviously, because now his conjunction with Lucifer, the Darklord Morningstar, and with Condemned, it's just amazing. You can bring him out reasonably easily, and also with Delight, and then you can use him to nuke your opponent's board. This effect, before I found it quite hard to resolve, but as we're moving into the map, I'm finding it easier to resolve that destruction field effect. The problem, more often than not, is just that it's very easy for your opponent to have cards that aren't destroyed by card effects. That's more of the issue with Morning Stars, using him as your fusion for the first Darklord, but it is still really a good card, and I definitely would start incorporating it into all my Darklord builds. What's also great about this build is you don't care if you mill it, because you Necro Fusion it, and then you get the nuke anyway. But moving on, we have the 3x Shell for draw power. It's really good card, probably the best card in Darklords. The 1 Tez for protecting your board, and also again, it doesn't care, you just mill it. It's just a name to mill so that you can banish for Necro Fusion. I've got the 2 Superbia. So in this, because Necro Fusion banishes face down, I do think it's particularly important to have more than 1 Superbia, so that after the first, if you do have to use Superbia to Necro Fusion, you don't lose advantage, because Superbia does generate huge amounts of advantage. And what's really good is if you can resolve a contact and a first Darklord with a Superbia in one turn, that's two free bodies on board you've got off that Superbia, which is just insane. So I do really think it's worth having 2 Superbias in this build. I've got the 1 Nurgle. Nurgle's really just there facilitating OTKs, and because it's another Darklord name. The 1 Nastin and the 1 Amdusk for the exact same reason, just more Darklord names. Then we play the 3 Raiden and 3 Charge of the Light Brigade, and this is just about milling cards to the graveyard. This deck, I just want to cycle through my deck and mill cards to the graveyard so I can revive them later. I mean, what's really nice about Raiden as well is that he's going to mill 2 cards and he's going to mill another 2 in the end phase. So having those 2 mills is just going to be so insane for you. That's potentially 4 Darklord cards. And the thing as well is that when Darklords, you don't even mind if your spells and traps go to the graveyard. It's good for you as well. So everything about this card is amazing, Darklords. And most of the time I'm normal summoning this. If I have a Raiden and a Pleasure in my hand, I'm probably going to be doing the Raiden play as opposed to the Pleasure play, because Pleasure is nice, but all she's going to do is put a Darklord in my hand. I don't want it in my hand. I want it in the graveyard so I can Necro Fusion it, or so I can revive it back to the front. Moving on, anyway, we've got the 3 Pleasure though, because we do still want to have as many normal summons as possible. Well, not as many, but we want to have a good amount. So with this, I basically have 6 direct normal summons, and I have Banishment as a kind of normal summon, and Charge is kind of another normal summon. Though sometimes you'll find that after using your first Charge, you lose all your Raiden, so the next few are going to be dead. Moving on, we've got the 1 Delight, because she's a good card. Just nice to have. This is always going to be the card I summon to my opponent's side of the field with Pleasure. I don't want to draw Delight. She is good, but I'd rather put on my opponent's side of the board and then hit into it so that I can reduce all my opponent's monsters' attacks by a huge amount. But yeah, really good monsters. And the 1 Ukabak, because he's nice to summon off Morningstar. He's just your only other way of searching spells and traps in this deck. Then we've got 3 Law of Darkness for draw power, just because again you're cycling through your deck and you just want to cycle and get to your key cards as quickly as possible. You've got your 3 Contact. Monster Reborn is always a good card, and it's nice for a deck to have 3 of their own. 1 Upstart to make this 39 card deck. 3 Banishment. Searching any card in the deck is going to be an amazing effect for Darklords. Then we've got 3 Charge of Light Brigade to search into our Raiden. So one thing you need to keep in mind as well is Charge of Light Brigade is not once per turn. So if you have 2 in your hand and you're lucky enough to not mill Raidens off it, you can mill 6 cards to your graveyard. I mean, in Darklords, that's actually quite insane, milling 6 cards. But yeah, moving on. Then we've got the 1 Sanctified and 1 Rebellion. So in this format, I don't think Darklord Enchantment, which is the one that takes control, I don't think it's worth playing 9 times out of 10. And the reason why is because if you're in a situation where you can take control of an opponent's monster and that monster doesn't have a negate, you probably could have done whatever you want anyway. It doesn't do much, and it's not plussing you in terms of advantage, because you need to either already have enchantment in the graveyard, so it needs set up, or you're going to need to send a monster to use that enchantment, so you're losing the monster anyway. So I don't think enchantment is just worth playing for the most part. I'd rather have sanctified 9 times out of 10. If there's a problem on field, I just want to negate it. I don't want to try and take control of it just for my opponent to negate that. No, I'd rather try and negate it so I can gain some LP and stuff, and just because I think it's more versatile. Yeah, so Darklord enchantment, I really don't play it as much as I used to. I think it's a great card, just not really good for this format, especially with cards like Dragoon running around. Rebellion, on the other hand, is a really good Darklord card, because it does give you the ability to kind of pop anything on the build, and it's one of the reasons why as Darklord players we don't mind Mystic Mine as much as others, because it tends to not be a huge problem for us. But moving on, we've got 3 back to the front, really good card in this deck, just because it's going to give you the ability to play on your opponent's turn a lot, and that's what you're doing in this deck. You're playing on your opponent's turn, so back to the front. And what you need to keep in mind though is that Superbia misses timing, so that's going to be your best target for back to the front, because it basically means 2 summons on your opponent's turn. But Superbia misses timing, so the only times you want to be using that effect is when your opponent normal special summons a monster, use it on in effects that, or on the change of phase. During those times, if you use that, there's no chain started, and so Superbia won't miss timing. However, if your opponent, for example, uses an effect, you chain it back to the front and use Superbia will miss timing, and it will not get a secondary revive effect. So that's why it's pretty important how you use this card, but still really good card. Sums it in defense, which is not going to matter because it's your opponent's turn, and it's really nice obviously because it's not once per turn. So having 3 in your hand means you're going to get 3 Darklords out of your graveyard if you need to. Then we've got the 3 Necro Fusion, so that's the reason why I don't play Darklord Uprising. To be honest, that card is terrible. The only reason why it's played is because Lucifer, Darklord, and Morningstar is really good, but that card in itself is terrible. Necro Fusion, on the hand, is really good, but unfortunately it's not searchable. But yeah, we play 3 Necro Fusion instead. What's nice about this is it basically means that it's free. So the disadvantage with Uprising is you need to set it up by getting cards in the graveyard, and then you need to pay the cost of 3 Darklords to do it. 3 Darklords either in your hand or your field. So you're negging 4 maybe, if you're not getting 3 or 4 depending on what you're doing, 3 or 5 actually, for maybe a bit of a plus with the Lucifer. With Necro Fusion, you're necking just 1 because the card's already in your graveyard. You've been dumping them with things like Charge and Radiant and stuff. So that's why I prefer Necro Fusion to it, and that's why I play it free. I was considering playing 1 Trap Trick, but I thought no, I'd rather just play 3 Necro Fusions and see those than play a Trap Trick just to potentially dump in it. It's like I'd rather have the ability to summon 3 times. But anyway, yeah, moving on. So we play the 3 Necro Fusion, really good card. And obviously when it brings out Lucifer, it's going to be amazing because he's going to extend for you. And we've got the 1 Storm Dragon's Return. This card is really good in Darklord, just because with your lore you can do things like banish a Superbia or banish an Eggshell and then bring him back later so you can put him in your hand, and so you're gaining some advantage. So I really do like Storm Dragon's Return. I did have a banished Darklord build that I might do again. I might do another variant of it, and this card is really good. It's also a really good card for you Cosmo players out there. But moving on from that into our extra deck, so we have the 1 Cross Sheep. Cross Sheep is really good in this build, obviously because you've got back to the front. So a lot of the times I'll link into a Cross Sheep, leave it on the field, the next turn do something like summon a Superbia to the zone. Superbia is going to trigger, Cross Sheep's going to trigger, and now I've just got 2 free summons off 1 card. I mean, really good card to have when you, especially in combo with Lucifer. Then we've got the 1 IP Masquerader, one of the best cards in the H deck for the Darklords, especially because Pleasure will lock you into into fairy effects during your turn. But IP Masquerader obviously is going to be used during your opponent's turn, so she's nice to kind of consolidate your materials. Then on your opponent's turn, you can start doing things with her. You've got the 2 Condemned Darklord, great card to have in Darklord, just nice for searching any Darklord card you want. You've got the 1 Nightmare Unicorn for comboing a Masquerader and spinning cards back to your opponent's deck. The Blackluster Soldier, very easily to get him out with his effect in Darklords because all of the Darklords are high level. Then we've got 1 Appaloosa. What's great about Appaloosa is she's a fairy, which means Nurgle gives her piercing damage and Lucifer makes her untargetable, and you can use her effects on the same time you use Pleasure. Really good card for Darklords. Got the Borosor Dragon for ending games. Avramax because you've got IP Masquerader and you've got a lot of Link 2s that you can use to easily make him. Minerva's another really easy card to make in this deck because, like I said, our focus is milling as many cards as possible. You can play Dugares instead, but I do prefer Minerva because she dumps the card to the graveyard. She dumps 3 as opposed to drawing 2 and discarding 1. So yeah, Minerva really good card. And if you dump a Raiden, you get a free draw, which is nice there. That hasn't happened for me yet. Then we've got the Dengirsu. Dengirsu is very easy to go into in this build, and he's just removal to any problem on the field. And we've got our super poly targets, so Dragon's Tapelia and Vision Dragon. Then we've got our 2 loots for Darklord of the Morning Star. A really good boss monster for Darklord. One disadvantage of him, obviously, is his steep requirements to bring out, but ignoring that, he is a really good monster and does do a lot of work for you once he's on the board. And once he's in the game, he provides a huge amount of advantage because you can just keep bringing him out of your graveyard with contact, and then you can use him with Superbia, and it's just insane the amount of advantage you get. That's one of the disadvantages I'd say Darklords have now compared to before. Before they had trouble getting into the game, and then once they were in the game, they weren't amazing. If they were lucky, they might snowball, but for the most part, they weren't amazing. Now, they still have a bit of trouble getting into the game and getting to their mid-late game stage, but once they get there, which is basically when you have a couple of Darklord contacts and banishments in the graveyard and you have a loose spot on field or in the graveyard, once they get to that stage, they are really good because they can just outgrind most decks, and they don't deck out. A lot of the times I have 3 or 4 cards in my deck and people will be like, you're about to deck out. I'm like, no, I'm not, because I can just keep using these effects to shuffle cards back into my deck, and then I just draw them. So it's like 3 cards in my deck is a lovely place to be with Darklords, because it means I'm always going to be drawing those contacts every turn and reviving every turn, which is really nice. But anyway, yeah, moving on to the side deck, just a pretty standard side deck. My side decks have been quite similar lately, I would say, just based on the format. I've kind of figured out where the format's going. So I've run 3 Nibiru, 3 Phantasme because they cover combo decks quite well, 3 Lightning Storm because it's a good card against every matchup, 3 Super Poly. This is definitely a Super Poly format. There are a lot of dark monsters, things like Dragoon, for example. Dragoon boards almost always are going to be a Verte plus Dragoon because that's how they're bringing them out, which means it's always vulnerable to Super Poly. Very good card against that, and 3 evenly match redeem with back row. But yeah, that is my Darklord mill deck. So guys, give this deck a try and let me know how it goes for you, and I will talk to you all soon. Oh yeah, and I'll be sure to have some replays out if you guys give this video some love. So I'll see you all later. Peace.